This year's EduPlant permaculture gardening competition training workshop started this week. Since 1994, the annual greening and permaculture program for schools helped thousands of learners across the country to feed themselves. For more about this year's competition, we're talking to EduPlant program manager Joanne Karthik. Joanne, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We know this is an annual thing and you've been doing it for a while, but for those who are not aware of the competition, briefly give us a definition of permaculture and what is the competition all about?
Okay, well, permaculture is all about designing food production systems, looking at sustainable land use and resource management. The EduPlant competition starts with a series of workshops teaching teachers how to work with nature rather than against nature to produce food at their schools. The competition component used to happen every year. We're now having it biannually, whereby we judge schools based on the food they're producing at their schools and the permaculture systems that they are able to establish at their schools as a result of participating in the program.
Why is it important to have the workshops?
Because they introduce the concept of permaculture to the schools and to the educators, as well as it gives them an idea of how to enter the competition and what it is that we're looking for when we're judging the schools during the adjudication phase of the program.
Now, you've recently introduced the cluster workshop approach. Is this the same approach you're going to be going ahead with in this time?
Yeah, we will continue. Towards the end of the 2010 program, Food and Trees for Africa, along with the current funding partners, looked at a new way how we can get more resources and more skills into the schools on the ground. So we identified 36 clusters around the country, 4 per province, where we started with a series of workshops whereby we had 4 last year and we're continuing with 3 more this year, 1 in each term. It provides us with a platform to distribute more resources and go a bit more in depth into the various components of establishing a permaculture system at their schools.
And who can sign up to be part of these clusters?
Well, the cluster workshop started last year, so we've already identified the clusters we're working in. But should there be anyone interested and wanting to find out if there's a cluster in the area, they are still welcome to join into these clusters. There's a list available of the cluster workshops on our website, www.trees.co.za. The one-day workshops are in new areas that we haven't targeted before through the EduPlant program. And that's only for educators, whereby the cluster workshops are for educators, learners, and community members.
Okay, so the current workshops which are attached to the competition with the one-day ones are for the educators.
They're for the educators.
And they can approach you from any school, from any area?
Any school, they're welcome to approach us. We've identified 45 areas where we're having workshops, 5 per province. As I say, they're areas we haven't targeted before through the program, so that we'll be able to reach more schools.
Is there a cost attached to these workshops?
The workshops are free for educators. We provide them with some resources at the workshops as well as catering. They just need to RSVP so we can make sure we've got enough resources available.
And in terms of entry for this year's competition, are you still taking entries?
The entries have just opened. The entries will close towards the end of May. So we're encouraging schools to start working on their entries now. It's quite a lengthy process. It's not just filling in all their details and stuff. They need to explain to us what it is they've actually done at their schools in the development of their permaculture systems.
What will the judges be looking for in the entries that are coming in?
We get a whole lot of entries in from around the country and we read through all the entry forms. So it's always very good if the schools can include some photographs and a lot of it, as much information as possible in those entries, because we base it on what we receive. A lot of the schools we're working with, we know what's happening on the ground, but we need to see it in the entry form so we can judge all the schools fairly, because there are a lot of schools out there that we are not familiar with them. So we really encourage schools to include as many photographs and lesson plans and any interesting information about what's happening at their schools. In 2010, we received just over 600 entries. We're really hoping to increase that this year. Once we've received all the entries, we read through all of them, and we choose about 200 entries where we actually go and visit those schools. And during those visits, during the pre-judging visits, we are able to provide them with some advice and help them with any problems they may be having on site at their schools. It also gives us a chance to provide them with some more resources in terms of reading materials and seeds. From that, we choose 60 finalist schools. So of the 200 that we visit, 60 of them will then come up for the finals event. This year it's taking place in the school holidays at the beginning of October. During this week, it's 1 educator and 3 learners from each school. Okay. And they come from all over the country. And for many of these participants, it's the first time they're leaving their villages and stuff. So it's a wonderful platform for them to interact with schools from various different walks of life and learn from them.
Awesome. What is exciting about the competition this year? Any exciting prizes? What have you got?
We've increased our cash prizes this year. We have various different categories we work with. So for schools who are just hearing about the EduPlant now and have never heard about it before, they mustn't worry. We've got a category called our Emerging Schools category. It's for schools who are just starting out with the development of their gardens at their schools. And our Intermediate Schools category is for schools who have been involved with the EduPlant program for some time but haven't actually won any prizes. And then the Advanced category is for schools who've won in the other categories I've just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then in 2008, we actually introduced a new category called our Mentoring Schools category, because what we found was happening is schools were winning the Advanced category, and by default, because they were doing so well, they were actually out of the competition, if I can say that. So the Mentoring Schools is now for schools who've just done exceptionally well by working through the various different categories, and it gives them a platform to compete against each other.
Joanne, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you very much for having me.
And if you've missed those details on the areas where the workshops are taking place, or you'd want more information on the clusters or the competition itself, give us a shout on our hotline, 011-791-5658, every weekdays from 8 until 4. Otherwise, visit our Mobi site, www.agritv.co.za.